Okay, so it's recording. So today the lecture is going to be really short. Some of the stuff that I've learned along the way that's not on the platform, and it might be cool for you guys to use tomorrow in the hackathon. So we're going to be learning about mainly event handlers, how to assign event handlers to things that are not buttons, right? And also how to do simple animations to get your things looking good when they move, right? So we're going to very quickly just create Xcode project. We're going to make a single page application. We're going to name this Thursday demo iOS 0417. There we go. I'm going to create a Git repository. So at the end of the lecture, I'm going to push it to GitHub, and I'll Slack you guys the link so you have all the code. Okay. So for event handling and animations, it really is about the code, right? The syntax of how you do it. That piece of code, like I still don't memorize. I just like copy and paste it from other projects. But it's very simple. It's just like a few lines of code, right? So, but before we get into that, I want to show you guys some little tricks, right? So the first one is safe printing. So for example, let's say I have, let's create a variable here. Call this my name. You are going to be a string, and you're an optional, right? So right now you're nil. In the view did load, I'm going to print my name.
Would you mind magnifying it a little bit?
Sure, yeah.
You should get some better glasses, nerd.
Maybe you just get a 100-inch TV.
Thank you.
It's telling me that, hey, this is optional. You need to unwrap that, right? So I'm going to unwrap this optional. Now, what's going to happen if I run this?
Print nil.
It's going to print nil.
Print nothing. Print nothing.
It's going to print nothing. Any other ideas?
It's gonna crash.
It'll crash, right? Yeah. So this is something that's called a fatal error, right? Fatal errors will crash your code, literally stop it, crash it, and then tell you, oh my God, fatal error, I cannot continue, right? These may seem scary, but they're actually really good, because if you have things that are fatal errors, you don't want to ignore it. You want to fix that error right away, right? So you don't want to kind of sweep it under the rug. So here it's telling me fatal error, unexpectedly found nil while unwrapping an optional value, right? So printing stuff or using, these optionals in the print statements, they're dangerous. They could crash your code. But the safe way to do it is to use the double question mark syntax. And then after it, you give it a message. So you say, my name is nil, what are you doing? Right, so if I do that, and I run it again, if the thing is nil, it'll just print the message instead. Right, so this ran, name is nil, what are you doing? Right? So this is a good kind of debugging, quick and dirty way to kind of see, okay, is that thing there? Is it nil? If it's nil, I don't want it to crash. I just want it to tell me this message and continue on down the line. Otherwise, when it crashes, it won't continue down. Okay, so just wanted to show you guys that.
Did you use that kind of syntax like outside of print?
I don't think you can.
It's only for
Yes, it's only for print. So actually, if you do this, it'll give you that yellow error, right? I'm going to stop this. It gives you this little yellow triangle. Click it. It tells me to avoid this stuff. There's three, different things I can select. The first one is to give it this default value, right? So default value will also be a string that you will print. Val nil, something like that, right? Another really cool thing that I found, and I didn't even know this until February when somebody, like an alumni, came in and showed me. So we know that we can do these comments, right? Comments are really powerful. But all of these comments are green. What if I want to make a comment that is like, hey, this is not, finished. Do this before you continue. Right? What if I want to make that like pop out? Right? So there's something you can do when you go to Xcode, Preferences, and here in the documentation markup, you can click on each of these things and notice that they have pre-assigned colors to all of these different things. That's why the colors are different, right? But for the documentation markup, this is an important one that you can use, and you can make it yellow. I like to make it yellow, right? So it kind of pops out. So once you have that, as soon as you have 3 slashes, it becomes a documentation markup. So you can kind of, I like to use the yellow comments to show that this is incomplete or this is like a critical thing. It's not a comment for an existing thing, but rather like a warning for me to say that, hey, get rid of all the yellow before you start on the new thing, right? So that's something that might come in handy later on. And all right, let's get into the event handlers, right? So we see that, let's go to our main storyboard. Let's go ahead and get a view into our storyboard. All right, so we have a view right here over here. We're gonna make it like, a square, and it's gonna be anchored to the top left. So we're just gonna anchor it there. We're gonna make your width and an aspect ratio to make sure that it's a square. Okay, so over here we're gonna edit it. We're gonna say your width is 50 and your aspect ratio is going to be 1:1. That's how we make things square. Okay. So now that we have this guy square, we're just gonna change the color so that we can see it, right? So this is our view. It has all the constraints that it needs. Now, notice that when I have a view and I want to drag this view to my view controller, I have outlet and outlet collection. I don't have the option to even make an action, right? So what if I wanted to make that thing, have some kind of event handler, right? The first thing you gotta do, you still have to make the outlet. So we're gonna call this guy, what do we call it here? Menu button view, right? Right, it's a UI view. And over here in the storage, there's weak and strong, right? I just want to mention quickly, the difference between weak and strong is that if it's a weak thing, then if the memory is, almost full, it'll get rid of the weak, variable assignments to free up memory. Normally that doesn't really happen that often, but for the things that we want, everyday things like these labels and outlets, we just have it weak. Very rarely do we want anything strong unless that thing is like super important. I have yet to encounter anything that I would use strong for yet. So just know that that's the difference. Okay, so we're gonna create this outlet. It's called menu button view, right? And then we're going to assign an event handler to it. And you need to do that within the view did load because then it'll happen, right? If you put it anywhere else, it might not trigger that code to happen. So we're gonna put it in the view did load. And the way you assign event handlers is you first, let's make this, let's do it here. Let's make this smaller so we can actually see it. All right, we want to get rid of this guy. All right, so you got this one over here. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to assign an event handler to menu button view, right? So the first line, we're going to create a constant, and we're going to name that anything we want, but we're going to name it menu button tap, like that. And then we're going to make it a UI gesture, or what is it? UI tap gesture recognizer. There we go, the first thing, right? We click on that. We will assign it target, right? So that will be the second thing here that pops up. The target is going to be self, and the selector is going to be the function that gets called, right? In this case, we're going to name it, handle menu button pressed, like that. Second thing we want to do is we want to enable interaction, right? So this is giving me an error because it's saying that, hey, you're saying that we want to call this function, but you haven't defined this function yet, right? So let's go ahead and define that function so it doesn't give me that error. Func, the name has to match, right? So once we have that, this error should be gone. Ah, okay. So we're missing the hashtag selector syntax here. So for the action, we want this guy to be a selector, and then it'll trigger that function. All right, so now the error is gone, but this is the right code. We'll send you guys this later on. This error is telling me that you declared this, but you're not using it, right? It wants to default to make it underscore, meaning that you're not going to use that, but we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to enable interaction, meaning that we're going to allow things to be interacted with that particular view, right? So we're going to say menu button view, this is the guy, dot is user interaction enabled, this one, right? And that's going to be equal to true. Third thing we want to do is we want to assign the gesture recognizer. So it's going to be menu button view dot add gesture recognizer. See it right here, right? And you are going to be the menu button tab right here, the one that you named up here. There we go. So in the documentation that I wrote up, it's menu view tab. So I assigned menu view tab. But the idea is that this constant is a gesture recognizer now. Whatever you name that constant, you will use that to assign the gesture recognizer that you made to the element that you want to give it to. Right? So with these three lines, you have just made a gesture recognizer for your view. Right? So for me, I have these in one of my projects. I usually just copy all of that, paste it into another project, and just edit in the little details so that I can get it to work for some other thing, right? So in this case, let's say we're gonna print this guy, right? We're gonna have it so that when we click the button, it's gonna print found nil, right? So let's run that. See, whenever I click it, it's going to print found nil. So this view now has an event attached to it. There's also other kind of recognizers. So this is the tap gesture recognizer. There's also other ones like swipe recognizer, so on and so forth. So using code, you have the flexibility to programmatically assign those actions, right? So that is how to assign event handlers, right? The last thing we're going to talk about is animations. So we're almost done here. The animations are really cool. So let's build a simple, something practical that you'll see in a lot of apps, right? We're going to build like a little side menu, like little thing that comes out. Right? So when we click this button, we want like a little side menu to pop in. Okay. So first of all, we're going to have to make a view. Right? We're just going to make the view to the edge like that. And we're going to give it some constraints. We're going to give it a top constraint, left, the bottom, and then we're going to say the width is going to be equal to 250, like that. So now this guy has all the constraints that it needs. We can actually, let's make the top space 0, like that. Or, let's get rid of that. Let's make the top space all the way to the very top. There we go, to the top of the screen. So if we give this guy color, let's say blue, we can see that it's filling up the entire area, and it's this is the end where we want it to look. the end result of where we want to look, right? Maybe we can have it, a little wider. And I'll show you why we're doing this later on to make it a little wider. Let's make it 300. Okay. So initially, you want this guy to be like to the left of the screen, so you can't see it. And when we click the button, we want it to go into the screen, right? So which constraint are we altering in that case? The left constraint, right? This left constraint here. So if we look at this one, or not this one, it's going to be this view here, leading constraint, this one, right? So if we go to our view controller, we bring up our assistant editor, we can go ahead and make, for this constraint, the leading constraint of the view, we're going to make an outlet for you, right? So we're going to call this left constraint, or the thing we want to target. So menu view left constraint. Okay, so now that we have this constraint here as an outlet, we can target it in our code. Okay, so let's see what we want to do with this guy when the view loads. Right, so when the view loads, we want the left constraint to be, so right now it's 0. If it's negative 300, then it'll be hidden, right? So we're going to target that menu view left constraint dot constant equals to negative 300, right? And now when we press the button, we want this guy to be, let's say 250, or 0 would bring it all the way out. Negative 50 would give it some space, right? So negative 50, like that. So let's see if this works. Right, so the reason why I gave it negative 50 and not 0 is because if I have the animation that kind of like springs, it'll like give me some white in between. So we do a negative 50 there. Yeah, there we go. See? We can have a toggle if we do this. We can say if this guy is equal to 300, if this guy is equal to negative 300, then we want to make it 50. Or else, then we make it negative 300. Right, so using that, we can toggle it back and forth. Can't do that. Oops. There we go. We're toggling it. The last step is just to add the animation, right? So the code for the animation, let's move this guy over again so we can have side by side. All right, so the animation, let's close this stuff. This is what we want to do. All right, so we want to set our constraints normally, just like we did here, and the animation will go after that. Right, so here is where we want to start the animation, or create the animation. And the thing we want to do is we want to first do this view set needs layout. So self.view.set needs layout, and this will be the same for every animation you make. You need to have that line. This is telling you the thing that, okay, it needs to start animating stuff beginning from this point. Okay. And then we're going to do the UI view animate. UI view.animate. All right, so as I type animate, we get all of these nice little choices here. We're going to select the one with duration, right? Oops. With duration, and it gives me a bunch of this stuff here, right? So the thing I do really care about is the duration. I'm gonna make it 0.5 seconds. The time interval, or actually this is not the one I want. Sorry. I want the one that has it's this one. Yeah, there we go. So the one with duration, we're gonna put 0.5 seconds. The delay, we're gonna say 0. If we wanted to delay the animation, we give it the seconds over there. We got the animation options. Actually, we can also do, before we do the options, we're gonna give it a spring damping and a spring velocity over there. All right, so we're gonna put that right before the options. And we're gonna give it, using spring damping 0.5, 45, and then initial spring velocity 0.7. And after we do that, then we can start doing the options, right? So the option that we want, and the options can be an array of the different type of options we want. We want the option of having the user interaction be enabled, because if we don't do that, then we have to literally wait until the animation stops before we can do anything else. We want to be able to have it halfway and then close it right away if we want to close it. Right? So the animations are going to be inside of the animation thing, and then over here we can have this block, which basically says, okay, this is where when you finish, we're going to run this code here. So here we're going to print animation done. And if you want to run some other functions to chain after the animation, you can do it using that. But the main thing here is the code inside of the animation function, which is self.view.layout if needed. So this guy is a pair with this one. They work in pairs. So the first part tells it that, hey, there is a layout. The second one is to tell it, if there is a layout, do the layout. Right? So that's the code for the animations. So let's run this. And we should see the little animation. Right? Now you can obviously change the damping, let's damping like 0.75, and then it'll be more resistance to the spring. See? And this is one of those times where you have the slow animations that will really help to see exactly what's going on, right? And we can close the slow animations up here and have it fast again, right? So if you make the spring damping like 0.25, then it'll go crazy. See? And you see a little bit of white on the end, right? That's why we did the -50. Because if you didn't, you will see a lot of white when it jumps forward. Yeah, so that's it for the animations. End of today, we're just gonna get through all of iOS basics, right? And then tomorrow we're gonna go on with the hackathon. Are there any other questions? I'm gonna stop the video.